One second, everybody. I gotta make sure all my stuff is taken care of. Okay. What is up, everybody? It is Jake here, back with Master Football. I'm getting this is way harder than it looks when you're doing it live. Usually, I get a couple takes to get my beginning, but I always mess it up. But anyways, thank you all so much for being here. We have a triple header to go through. We've got a couple things because last week was very eventful in the world of college football for a lot of different reasons. One of those reasons being is that it's literally just, I mean, there was a huge piece of news that just came through recently. There was a giant piece of news last week. In addition to, there's a very very small, but we're gonna make a mountain out of a molehill here because it actually points to a bigger thing that's happening in college sports at this point. That point being, independents are going away, and we're gonna get into that in a second here. But again, really quickly here, please, I would really appreciate it. Please subscribe. Okay, I'm really low in the subscriptions here. We're doing okay. I'm not as good as I want to do. I really appreciate if you would do that. Also, hit the like button. It helps out with the YouTube algorithm. People can find me a lot easier. I really appreciate that. In addition to, also, if you can get in the comments, let me know what you think about all this stuff. If you accidentally tipped me, I'd really, really appreciate it. But anyways, let's get going on our first article here. And again, the more importantly here, we have one small article to go through and then a bigger one to talk about because I think the bigger article, and then there's actually also a tweet about this that I think is, it shows where the direction of the sport is going, or at least where some people in the sport want the direction of the sport to go. We'll get into that in a second really quickly here. First, we're going to present our information. All right, one sec. All right. First thing, here we are. College football playoff revises 12-team format to include the five highest ranked conference champions. The new 5-7 model accounts for the Pac-12 defections. And Kirk Schultz, the Washington State guy, he's out there. And I know a lot of people were thinking, oh, he's saying no. He's saying no. Basically, for any of you who don't know what happened, he came out and he was like, all right, now hold on. We're not going to prove this just yet. Because remember here, the CFP committee needed universal approval in order for these changes to go through. But they didn't go through because one person, again, namely Kirk Schultz from Washington State, representing the Pac 12, now the Pac 2, is like, now hold on a second here. We got a lot of stuff going on. We were talking about a 6-6 model, meaning the six highest rated conference champions and then the six at large bids. However, everybody's like, okay, but your conference clearly just got pillaged. It went from the Pac 12 to the Pac 2 in literally like a matter of like 8, 11 months. It was not very long. So a lot of people are like, all right, so that obviously takes away an automatic bid. Well, Kirk Schultz is like, well, this was taken away from us. We did everything right. We did everything we were supposed to do. And it was taken away from us. What can we do here? So ultimately, they got a couple of things. They got more money. He basically held out his vote in order to get certain, you know, how do I say, leniency towards certain things. Like I said, more money here and there. Also, he's the reason why he was trying to buy so much time was because there's several questions right now about the validity and the ability of the ACC to survive. Granted, with the whole Florida State situation, whether or not if they get out, does Florida State, Miami, Clemson, North Carolina, do they all follow? Does Virginia go too? Again, there's lots of questions to ask with that one. But you're looking at it here, and it's like, okay, well, all right, so you're Washington State, you're trying to buy as much time as you can. Eventually, you are going to cave because you don't really have a lot of leeway here. Remember here, as much as they have that leverage, it all operates on good faith. However, if they keep on, the thing about a negotiation is if you're aggressive enough in negotiations, you will get what you want more often than not. However, there are plenty of negotiations where the other side will say, go to hell. And unfortunately, go to hell to Kirk Schultz would be the death sentence. So he ultimately had to cave. He caved here on this new 5-7 model. That's not what we're going to talk about here. That's important to understand, that to make sure that this is going on, because okay, well, we see it for the expanded playoff. This is happening this next season. So again, everybody knows, first of all, how far off in the future people schedule non-conference games. You can't even imagine how much they're like, we don't even know about our future playoff plans less than 12 months away, let alone the fact that it takes us 18 zillion years to schedule non-conference games. So you think how much, you know, needed emphasis of getting this done there was. So they got this done. So it's good. This is not what we want to talk about here. The more important article we're going to talk about here is this next one. All right, here we are at SI.com. College football playoff expansion will further enrich the big conferences. Think about this here. We already got to 12. We have yet to play a single 12-team expanded playoff game. Not one of those has occurred yet. Not one. We're already talking about expanding it. The Big Ten and the SEC continue their power play by pushing for a 14-team CFP before the new 12-team format debuts. This is from Pat Ford the other day. Says, got a theory, hear me out. The leaders in college sports are actually using the CFP as a giant Tibetan sand mandala. You know, those intricate, ornate, circular works of art, the ones that are completely destroyed by the creators upon completion. That's the only explanation I can come up with for a commissioner group that worked for years through significant pushback and politics to construct a shimmering 12-team playoff that will debut next season, this coming season. College football is over right now. I will have first round games on, it will have first round games on campuses. It will reward 4 conference champions with automatic bids and buys to the quarterfinals. It will retain ties to traditional bowls. It will be beautiful. And his narrative there was, so consequently, they're going to try to destroy it. And now, before ever seeing that breakthrough advancement play out, they want to deconstruct it. Just blow all that pretty sand right off the table. According to multiple media reports this last Wednesday, there's momentum among the conference commissioners towards expanding the playoff to 14 teams starting in 2026. Eventually, they'll want 16. Count on it. Again, you see this happening in pro sports right now. So if anybody understands the NFL right now, the NFL currently has 7 of the AFC and NFC. It used to be 6, and there was 2 first round buys. Now they have 7 teams in the playoff, and they have 1 first round bye. So the first place team, again, so it used to be before, okay, well, we got the 2 seed, whatever, we get a first round bye. Now you have to get that 1 seed to get that first round bye. But with that, you also see the fact that they have a 17-game regular season schedule right now. 17 games. You're like, that's kind of weird. It is weird. They're going to try and go to 18, and they're eventually going to try and get to 20. And that's just what it is. Again, the NFL, unfortunately, there's limitations on how many games you can play. You can't play a 50-game season. Well, you can. You just need rosters that are 175 people big. So, unfortunately for that, they're trying to squeeze out every single dollar they can out of this model. And again, I think the thing about college sports too, and again, that's pro sports, that's the NFL. The thing about college sports is college sports has been managed by, I heard my boy Matt Brown. He said this earlier. Matt Brown was like, university presidents don't know very much about business, and they know even less about sports and sports business. So you think about how mismanaged college sports has been for so long. And if we're being honest, it's not even college sports, because the NCAA committee, the NCAA, the tournament, that's been around for years. That's a great money-making machine. It is doing its thing. However, college football has, how do I say this, been drastically underutilized. Again, the reason why a lot of people were mentioning private equity. Private equity. What the hell is private equity? How's getting into sports? I think, and again, my boy Tony Altsmore, he brought it up where he was like, people just say private equity. They don't know what that actually means. And unfortunately for universities don't like giant chunks of their money being taken away by private equity because of down payments. Again, that's a lot of conversation there. But basically the point about it is private equity looks for popular brands that are mismanaged. Does that not perfectly encapsulate college football right now? So before, we literally had it to where, I mean, there was these with the bowl system where the Big Ten champ, the old Big Ten champ, would play the Pac-12 champ, and then we would vote before the bowl games as to who was the national championship. There was one year where Alabama won the national championship game, lost their bowl game, in addition to finishing 3rd in their conference, and they were the national champs. I mean, again, granted, that was back in the 50s, but that is the older systems that we had. We also see certain things where the Heisman Trophy voting is not, you can vote in like October 30th. That's wild. You can vote before all of November. You could literally go 0-5, and somebody's already got 0-5, including the conference championship game, and you already have your conference champion, or you already have your Heisman Trophy vote out there. It's just the way it is. Again, the problem with college sports is that if you don't have a centralized voice, everybody kind of just does their own thing and nobody pulls in one single direction. That's the reason why the UFC is bigger than boxing. Granted, the top boxers basically just Floyd Money Mayweather, they can make more than the UFC guys, but at the same time, you would rather be in the UFC than be a boxer. I mean, you'd rather be a top flight boxer because at that point, then you're going to throw some fights. I'm not just kidding. I'm not saying you're throwing fights, but I'm saying that the money at the top is just different. However, throughout the sport, generally person for person, fighter for fighter, the UFC is better for the sport. Or it's a better sport. It's a better league. It's got a lot better things going on than boxing does. Same thing with the NFL versus college. College, unfortunately, nobody's pulling in the same direction. I think, and I'm going to knock on wood here. Again, this could totally change. I think Greg Sankey gets it. I think he gets it. Tony Petitti, I don't know yet. I'm not sure. I think, and again, there's an asterisk with that there. I think that Greg Sankey gets it. Now, unfortunately, getting it for him is, we'll go into that in a second here, but I think that he understands kind of we need to pull this sport in the same direction here. Whether or not he is obligated to do that, he's not obligated to do that. And in fact, his paycheck is to make sure that 16 SEC teams are all the best going forward. But we'll get into that in a second here. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that I think that the CFP, the committee, this round table of knights, is actually trying to pull the sport forward to a new age, a new dawn, a good spot. And with that, we have this 12-team playoff. However, again, same thing with the pro sports. They're like, well, all right, well, let's have 6 teams in the playoffs. Well, no, let's have 17 per conference. Oh, well, let's have one first round bye. Let's have an extra wild card game. Let's have 17 regular season games. You see the fact they're trying to squeeze as much as they can out of this. This article basically goes through the fact that we had 12 teams that was originally agreed upon. It was 6-6 model. Okay, then one conference falls apart. Okay, 5-7 model. Okay, well, now what if we get to 14? There was also some rumors out there that the Big Ten, and again, I'm not trying to say anything, the Big Ten in particular was basically saying, we were wondering if we could have 4 guaranteed bids per conference. And again, maybe not every conference. Oh, yeah, well, historical record and this and that. That was the discussion here. We'll get into that in a second here. But first, I want to talk about the rest of this article to go through this 14 team. Again, you say eventually they'll want 16. Let's continue on with this article. The timetable for deciding on potential expansion is roughly a month. According to the CFP executive director, Bill Hancock, they're on the clock. Along the way, the richest conferences also want most favored nation status with more auto bids for their leagues. That's the bigger and more troubling news. It's the latest chapter in the ongoing Big Ten SEC power play, exactly the kind of thing we've seen as those two conferences continue their Darwinian predation. That's what my theory admittedly breaks down. Tibetan sand mandalas are, quote, created to encourage healing, peace, and purification, according to worldhistory.org. The CFP has been created, and then it will be deconstructed in pursuit of more centralized power. There is no healing, there's no peace, and there sure as hell is no purity being attained here. There is no satiating the appetite for the deconstruction of competitive balance. There's no pausing to actually see how the new format will work or to appreciate it in action. There's no caretaking for the overall sport. There's no concern about eventually pushing the envelope past the ripping point. The players past reasonable demands for non-professionals. The fans past what their wallets can support. Unfortunately, you and I both know, the reason why all this is getting pushed is because of the fans. Is because, unfortunately, like last year, college football, I'm going to say it right now. It's going to be controversial. 2023 college football was better than 2023 pro football. Sorry, not sorry. It was awesome. Those UW and Oregon games were incredible. The Michigan versus Ohio State, again, that game was a banger. The CFP games were all, except for, ironically, the national championship, they were awesome games. Overtime in the quarterfinals. The ball was in the end zone for Texas to take the league. Ultimately, it was batted down. I mean, that was the semifinals, not the quarterfinals, the semifinals. And then the national championship, it was close up until halftime, and then Michigan pulled away. I'm telling you, it was so awesome. Think about the Ohio State Notre Dame game where Ohio State scores with like in the final seconds there. Think about that. This sport is awesome. We've all known that. There's a reason why you watch this channel. But again, the thing about that is the reason why it was so good was because of a couple reasons. In fact, my next article here, my next articles that we'll go through in the next section of this, I'm actually going to go through about the parity of sports because of NIL and the transfer portal. But we'll continue on here. Of course, there are many of the same people who want to expand the near perfect NCAA basketball tournament beyond 68 teams as, quote, advancement, unquote, that virtually nobody is clamoring for, and who have expanded the richest conferences to 16 or 18 schools in direct conflict with geography, academics, and established traditions, i.e., again, Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC makes sense up until they got the rest of those, up until they got Oregon and Washington, USC and UCLA to the Big Ten geographically doesn't make a lot of sense. What would a 14-team format look like? It would mimic the NFL's 14-team playoff, which awards first-round buys to the top 2 seeds and has the other 12 duke it out. For what it's worth, a lot of people like college football because it's not exactly like the NFL, a fact that also seems to be lost on leadership. Would 4 on-campus playoff games in the first round expand to 6 with the quarterfinals and semifinals still at traditional bowl sites? Given the finite number of TV broadcast windows and the amount of trepidation already expressed about going up against the NFL in December and January, when do they plan to play those extra games? More importantly, what would the bid distribution look like? This is where the Big Ten and the SEC are likely to push for protections they shouldn't actually need, with multiple guaranteed spots in every field. From what I understood, and I am totally willing to be pushed back on this in many different ways. From what I understood, it was the Big Ten who was asking for the automatic bids or the guaranteed spots, as the SEC was like, okay, we want ourselves to be a bunch of at-large bids. Here's the reason why. Unfortunately, I think that the concept of automatic bids per conference operates on the understanding that generally your teams are going to be good enough to play there. And I think that, to be fair, is when you add enough of the power programs, because conference realignment, this last round of conference realignment was just about the top teams or the championship level teams of one conference going to a conference that has more championship level teams. So realistically, I mean, if you think about this year, like Oregon, Washington, Michigan, and Ohio State, those would have been the top 4 teams. And Penn State's on the outside looking in that instance from an automatic bid perspective here. But I think that the SEC understands, and the reason why this is a small point here. This is a small point. Again, I don't think this is going to have a lot of strength to it, but I think that there is a small amount of hope in one thing for the Big 12, for the ACC, and for the remainder of college football. The big hope here is, unfortunately, is the same thing as the Cold War. And in the Cold War, you had to pick. And the United States won because they just basically got more allies because of the Bretton Woods Agreement. That was basically the reason why they won the war. Also because of freedom and economic development. But anyway, so continue on. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is you got to pick a side. The SEC and the Big Ten, you can't go to battle against either of those and win. However, your best bet is to get them to turn against each other. I don't know how you're going to do that. I don't know how that's possible. But I do think what you can do is you could potentially form a coalition. So in a lot of other countries here, there's certain countries where the winning party will get like 20% of the vote. But they got a bunch of other people in there to form a coalition, form a government of this side and that side, and blah, blah, blah. I think that that's what the Big Ten and the SEC, the best hopes is to have certain people glob onto them, and hopefully they can sway to get something that they want. Because unfortunately, the Big Ten and the SEC, as much as Greg Sankey, I do believe he wants the best for college football. If they accidentally overemphasize the SEC, oh no. Again, same thing with Tony Petitti. But I think your best bet is getting them to go up against each other. How? I think the Big Ten, from what I understood, and again, I can be moved on this, they're the ones that wanted those 4 automatic bids, whereas the SEC want as many at-large bids as possible because the SEC knows we have a bunch of schools that really, 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 really care about being good at football. Whereas if, a couple of schools in the Big Ten, let's just say they have a couple down years, it's okay, it's fine. I think that Michigan, and I'm taking a chance here when I say this, Michigan in the next couple of years is going to flirt with like a 7-5 year. I don't know if Sharon, that's because I don't know if Sharon Moore's the guy. That's the only reason why. Not because I think they're going to be bad, but because I think Jim Harbaugh he's different, man. He's going to, first of all, I'm a little worried. I'm a Raiders fan, so the Chargers are going to get good, which is going to be scary. But I'm basically saying here that the SEC wanted as many at-large bids, whereas the Big Ten it's rumored that the Big Ten wanted these auto bids. That is a leverage point that the teams, the Big 12, the ACC, and the rest of college football can use, hopefully, to gain favor with one side or the other. I think it's the best interest in college football for them to be as many at-large bids as possible. Give one bid for the 5G5 teams or G6 teams or whatever. Give them one bid. The best team out of those 70 or so teams can probably compete on a national level on a year-to-year basis. You think about Tulane a couple of years ago beating, USC. You think about what Boise State has done. I know that's a long time ago. You think about what Cincinnati has done. Though a lot of those teams, granted, I think Cincinnati is up, obviously, what they are. They're in the Big 12. But again, every single year, there's generally one team out of those 70 teams who can compete. Now, the problem is now they're probably going to have to go up against a first or a second seeded team in the country. So the number one team in the country. So go up against Michigan. It's going to be tough. With that, I wanted to make sure I go through this because, again, basically that article from Pat Ford goes through and he basically just says, hey, man, I'm a little worried about how this is going to shake out. As a matter of fact, they're already talking, and they being all of the SEC lackeys, how I say this. I don't know about lackeys, the appropriate term. SEC affiliates are already talking about something that we need to discuss as well. This point here. Paul Feinbaum on G5 teams in the new CFP format. So again, hasn't happened yet. They're going to be in the new CFP format now. There's no way they can compete. They're simply going to be sacrificial lambs. And then down here, boom. The number 10th ranked team in the country can't hang with the number 1 to the number 3. Feinbaum is just upset he can't get more SEC teams in, and that is the point here. And remember here, in college football, although this last year, we're going to go through that, and actually, we had a lot more parity in college football that we wanted to. The thing about the CFP that we want, those G5 teams, they want one thing. They want a spot. Again, it's the same thing with a 16 versus a 1 in the NCAA tournament. They might make it interesting. More often than not, they're going to lose. A 215 has happened a little bit more, and a 314 has happened a lot more. But the 116, the 16 team knows. They know they're not. They have a chance at the national championship, but they know it's probably not going to happen. That's all they need. But we see that Paul Feinbaum and the narrative here, the auto bids get a lot of the top people at the top upset because they're like, oh, well, these automatic bids, we added all these championship level teams, and now a team that's not in that championship level is going to the championship. Well, it's like, well, yeah, of course, because unfortunately, the thing about the Big Ten and the SEC that I think they slowly are realizing this, is that if it seriously is Big Ten, SEC, LA, Seattle, and Oregon, and nobody else is in, viewership's going to hurt. Absolutely, viewership's going to hurt. Now, I do think, to be fair, more big games are going to happen now. I mean, we're going to have Oregon, Michigan, and Ohio State, USC, and those games are going to happen on a more frequent basis here. But I also think that if it eventually gets, remember here, I think that the SEC kind of hurt itself in the early 2010s because it was just like they were so dominant. It was just like, all right, well, guess Georgia, Alabama, and Clemson. One of those three teams is probably going to win the championship. And then the off chance it's a field SEC team, LSU here, Auburn there, and so on. And unfortunately, I'm out here in the Mountain West. I didn't care about watching. There was a couple of years, it was Clemson and Alabama. I remember when they rematched, I was like, I'm not watching. It was the year that Trevor Lawrence was a freshman. I did not watch 1 second of that game. Not a single second of Clemson versus Alabama. This last year, I watched every second I could, even when it was Alabama, Michigan in the CFB semifinals. I watched every second that I could because there was just more teams involved. I think that what's happening here is we're going to the 12-team playoff. They've already expanded the playoff. They've expanded the expanded playoff. They're already talking about that again. I think that Pat Ford, what he was saying is basically he's like, let's see how this works. We've got everything lined up. We've got a 5-7 model. We've got all the major bowl games involved. We've got a calendar that makes sense. We've got, 5 automatic bids and 7 at-large bids. This is going to be awesome, and we're going to ruin it. Because Paul Feinbaum says a thing like that. Because Tony Petitti wants 4 automatic bids. Maybe Greg Sankey does too. Again, we're moving in a lot of different directions here. The expanded playoff. Yeah, can we just figure out one? That's all I'm saying. All right. Done with that. Up next, feeds into my point about the first thing that we talked about there, because I was basically just going through like, are we sure that these automatic bids are worthwhile? I think the automatic bid concept operates on the understanding that, listen, our top 4 teams, no matter what, look at historical, we're basically getting automatic bid because of what happened a long time ago. Unfortunately, something that came through, and I personally am a big fan of this, up until we get collective bargaining and a salary cap or something like that. Up until that point, this article here is going to contribute to more parity in college football than anything else out there. I don't want to hear what you want to say. We're going to get in that here in a second. All right, first of all, hey, hold on a second. I'm going to go through some of these really quickly here. All right. Orlando, my boy. What's up, bro? What's up, dude? How you doing, Orlando? Appreciate it, man. Absolutely. All right, we're going to show another one here. What team are you going to use for the Dynasty and EA College Football 25? Okay. All right. This is an important point here that we need to talk about. We're going to talk about for a second here because I have my other channel. I want to talk about EA College Football. By the way, the MF Film Room, it's in the description here. Go find EA College Football content. That's a big fan of that. All right. Orlando, my boy. What team am I going to use for the Dynasty and EA College Football? I want to check out some of those new teams. I want to check out Kennesaw State. I want to check out Liberty. Okay, I want to check out Coastal Carolina. Got that teal turf. Check out a couple of those teams. Personally, though, Georgia State, they're playing in the old Braves Stadium. That's actually kind of cool. They used to play in the Georgia Dome on the past game. I don't know why my nose itches so much. But that's probably what I'm thinking here for a couple of those teams. I'm a big fan of those guys. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Renee disagree with me. Renee says, nah. Says the AFC playoffs and the Super Bowl were better than college. No, they weren't. 100% no, they weren't. Not in. You will never sell me on that at all. I do think there was a couple interesting games. Again, watching the Ravens absolutely implode against the Chiefs. The Chiefs versus basically just watching the Chiefs. If you're saying the AFC playoffs, you mean just being, because if you watch the Chiefs and the Dolphins was a terrible game. It was a horrendous game. Okay, you think about what else were the other games there? You think about the Ravens and the Texans. That was a terrible game. You think about who'd the Bills play? They played somebody in the first round. I have no idea off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that they won that game. Oh, Bills and Steelers. I think it was Bills and Steelers. So yeah, that was a terrible game. So basically, the Chiefs. It's important. It was entertaining to watch the Chiefs. That's true. But Renee, I apologize. Could not disagree with you more. The AFC playoffs, the Super Bowl was interesting. I do feel like there's a certain percentage of me that's like, what's Brock Purdy going to do when his regular contract kicks in? Like, how good is he actually? Like, do we have a Trent Dilfer situation? What are we talking about here? That's all I want to talk about with that. Okay. Renee, I appreciate the comment there. Coming from a Raiders fan, I expect your take. Listen, the Chiefs were entertaining to watch, by the way, the last team to beat the Chiefs. But yes, actually at the same time, like, think about, I mean, if I'm being honest here, like, Bills, Steelers, flush it down the toilet. Chiefs, Dolphins, flush it down the toilet. Ravens, Texans, flush it down the toilet. So yeah, I mean, the other games though, I mean, Chiefs, Bills was awesome. Chiefs, Ravens was super entertaining for a 17-10 game. I believe it was 17-10. Chiefs defense they were freaking good, dude. They were amazing out there. But and then the Super Bowl was super entertaining again because, man, the Niners are their roster from top to bottom is so good. But man, Brock, it's a question at the end of the day. That's the reason why I picked the Chiefs. The Niners were a 2-point favorite, and I was like, dude, take that 3-point, take a game-winning field goal by the Chiefs. You're going to make a lot of money. But again, mate, we're talking about college sports here. Let's continue. So this article, like I said, is going to contribute more to the competitive nature of college football than anything else out there in the future, bar none. And as a matter of fact, if anything happens to this, then I would worry about the competitive nature of college sports up until collective bargaining. Here's what I mean. Let's present it really quickly here. Remember all that stuff we had about Tennessee and everything like that? Oh my God, you can't do this. The NCAA cannot enforce NIL rules after judge grants injunction. So again, this is related to the Tennessee thing. For those of you, a quick run-up on the Tennessee thing. Basically, the NCAA only ever punishes somebody if they absolutely 100% can prove that something is happening. Again, they want to make sure they take cases they know they can win. In Tennessee, let's just say, for better or for worse, was a little, what's the term I want to use here? A little laissez-faire with their following of rules. And they were definitely using their NIL as inducements. Inducement meaning using it to get somebody to come to your school. Basically just pay for play. The same thing, I saw an article here that says the college football currently is openly doing what we gave SMU the death penalty for. So what's happening right now? It's basically what's going on here. So with that, the fact there's no more NIL rules, there's none. Think about that. A federal judge in Tennessee granted a preliminary injunction, so we're not sure. Again, it could eventually, go away. Injunction Friday afternoon that prohibits the NCAA from punishing any athletes or boosters for negotiating name, image, and likeness deals during their recruitment process or while they are in the transfer portal. A lot of things that the NCAA was saying is the NCAA is like, it's very clear that the backup right guard, who is a 4-star who committed to you guys, does not have $80,000 worth of NIL value. You just paid him $80,000 to come commit to you for the school. And everybody around the country is like, yeah, that's exactly what we've been doing. But they got Tennessee for it. Specifically, it's Tennessee felt like they were being singled out. They were, because, again, I think probably because they just got caught so blatantly. But with that, Tennessee's like, we're going to fight back. They did. And now it looks like temporarily there's no rules. The injunction is not a final ruling in the case. Again, we said that before. But the judge's decision will likely have an immediate and dramatic impact on how NIL deals are used in the recruiting process. Quote, the NCAA's prohibition likely violates federal antitrust laws and harms student athletes, U.S. District Judge Clifton Corker wrote in his decision Friday. And again, we want to make sure here that the attorney generals of Tennessee and Virginia, they were the ones who teamed up on this because Tennessee felt like they were being ganged up against. And usually all the other teams are like, oh, Georgia fans, then Florida fans, then LSU fans. Look at Tennessee. But a lot of them were like, no, this affects us too because guess who also uses NIL funds as inducements? I'm not mad. Don't hate the player, hate the game. It is what it is. I'm actually going to go through why here. And more importantly, my bigger issue is not the fact that temporary injunction basically says there's no NIL rules or regulations at this point. That's not what I'm going to talk about. Because again, the point behind it is I said that this right here is going to contribute to more parity in college football than anything else. Here's the reason why. I want to make sure that I go through this. One second here while I pull this up. The great thing about being a really, really good college football team is the fact that you're always going to get recruits anyway. Here is what I mean. So if you look at the recruit rankings right now. So here you are, the 2024 recruiting football team rankings. Let's go through this and let me just see if you see any commonalities here. Okay. Georgia, Alabama, Oregon, Miami, Ohio State, Texas, LSU, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Auburn, Clemson, Florida State, Tennessee, Florida, and then Penn State. Of all of those teams up to Penn State and Oregon, I believe, since 2000 are the only ones that haven't won a national championship. Georgia, Bama, Oregon is gone. Miami has won a national championship. I think 2001, they won the national championship. Ohio State won the national championship. Texas won the national championship. LSU's won the national championship. Oklahoma, I believe, in 2000 has. Notre Dame went to the national championship. Notre Dame also didn't win it. Auburn won a national championship. Clemson won a national championship. Florida State won a national championship. Tennessee won a national championship. Florida won a national championship. Michigan just won one as well. USC won one as well. But you see the fact that there is a very high correlation of national championships among the recruit rankings. Because again, remember here at the end of the day, if you don't need extra incentive to go to Georgia or Alabama, it helps, but you don't need extra incentive to do so. Now, where this changes, this is where it is very, very particular here, because within the recruiting rankings, it's pretty well understood that that's how that operates. However, what about the transfers? All right, Ole Miss, all those championships they won. Oh, well, what about Texas A&M? All the, Well, Oregon, okay, and then Florida State, and then all those Colorado, and Louisville. Okay, Texas, Ohio State, and then South Carolina. Alabama, and then NC State. Washington's gotten to the national championship, and then Missouri. USC, okay, Georgia, Kentucky, TCU, Florida, Purdue. Again, you see the fact that we do not have the same level of competition. We don't have the same level of parity. I wouldn't even want to say parity. Same level of concentration of national championship winning teams. A lot of these teams, again, Ole Miss wants to win a national championship. Texas A&M wants to. Colorado wants to. Louisville wants to. South Carolina wants to. The thing about this is the inducements from NIL don't affect people's ability to go to Georgia It helps. That's not why you go to Georgia. Okay. You still have NIL, you still have inducement NIL, but that's not the main reason why. Ole Miss, they're not able to attract the same level of recruits as a Georgia or an Alabama does. However, we can make up for it. We can try a little bit harder here. And maybe we'll try a little bit harder with a little bit of inducement here. Maybe Ole Miss do. We already know about Texas A&M. Texas A&M, all that oil money, they want to be good at sports. We already know about that. But I'm basically saying the point that I'm trying to make here is that with that ruling, that the NIL is basically can be used as an inducement. There's no real rules at this point. It's just a preliminary injunction that might go away eventually. Trust me, that might happen. But with that, I wanted to show you something that's really interesting to see here. All right. This is so cool to look at this up until you actually see it. Week 14. So this is headed into conference championship week. So right now, this is right here is conference championship week is set. The teams are there. These are the teams that are going to be playing for the potential to go to the college football playoff and so on. So check about this out. Of the top 8 teams, number 1, number 4, and number 5 and number 6 didn't go. 1, 4, 5, and 6 did not go to the national championship. 2, 3, 7, and 8 went to the national championship. When was the last time we entered conference championship week? And legitimately, the 8th seed was Alabama. Alabama had an overtime game against Michigan to go to the national championship. Alabama, during that week, like I said, heading into the SEC championship game, a lot of people are like, Alabama, well, Georgia's going to win. They're going to be fine. Again, that is a level of parity that I haven't seen in college football in years. I want to say it was 2016 or 2015. The number 2 team in the country, Ohio State, played the number 3, or it was Ohio State or Clemson. They played each other. It was 31-0, 2 versus 3. And that was in the playoff. That's not talking about the conference championship week, which, by the way, we saw Oregon lose to Washington again. We saw, Ohio State didn't play actually that week. Texas beat Oklahoma State. They won that game. Michigan won. And again, so Florida State, they won, but then they actually got left out. That's a whole argument in and of itself. But basically what I'm trying to say here is that with the fact that the NCAA is no longer, or at least preliminarily, no longer allowed to regulate those inducements. Like I said, the thing about it is those top flight teams are always going to get those players. It's been Colin Cowherd at this point before. He's like, who won the national championship in the 1950s? Let me guess. Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, USC. No way. Who's going to win the national championship in the 80s? Michigan, Ohio State. Actually, a couple of those teams actually had down years. I know the USC in the 90s was not exactly doing fantastic. But what I'm basically trying to say here is generally, Oklahoma is going to be fine. Texas is going to be fine. What the NIL inducement allows is those mid-tier teams that really want to be good take away. Remember here, the Alabama, for every one guy they get in the transfer portal, they lose 4 guys who are like, you know what, I'm going to be a backup at Alabama, but I'm going to go over here and start right away, and they're going to pay me for it. I'm going to go to Ole Miss. I'm going to go to Texas A&M. I'm going to go to Louisville. I'm going to go to Colorado. We're going to see how that kind of goes. That's the reason why I think that article there, again, when we have a salary cap or something like that, a lot of stuff that can happen here. However, those top flight recruits are always going to commit to USC and Michigan and Ohio State and Georgia and Alabama. They're always going to commit there. But what happens when they start committed to a top flight transfer, commits to TCU, goes to Oklahoma State, goes to BYU? That's where those teams can formulate once they get the right number of seniors. They get a transfer in and a couple, important positions. At Ole Miss, again, this next season, Ole Miss, I'm just saying, it's interesting about Ole Miss. But again, that article there, going through that NIL, I absolutely love it. I know that it sounds weird because it does create a pay-for-play situation, but it always was like that. It always was. There's some people out there who say, oh, yeah, well, the reason why the college football was so competitive was because now not only can one conference pay all their players. I know that's an SEC dig, and the SEC deserves more credit than that, okay? But still, at the same time, like, the rumor is that if it's an in-state player, the in-state school is the only one allowed to offer them the most amount of money. And again, whether or not that's true or not, I don't know. But all I'm saying here is this inducement The NIL as an inducement, it's leading to more parity for right now. All right. Last thing here before we end off. So, something came through. It is the most tectonic plate shifting move of 2024. The first conference realignment move. It is an unbelievable thing to consider. It's UMass, baby. I wish I could pull this up faster because that would have gone a little bit more smooth. But bam. Here we go. UMass is set to become the 13th member of the MAC for the 2025-2026. Remember here, they dated back 2012, 13, 14, and 15. As a matter of fact, NCAA football 2014, UMass was in the MAC, and it would give us it was an oblong number. It was six on one side, 7 on the other. It's kind of a weird spot there. But basically, the University of Massachusetts is set to join the MAC in all applicable sports for the 2025-2026 year, according to a source that told ESPN. They are an independent in football, but plays in the A10 in basketball and the vast majority of their other sports. UMass's hockey will remain in the Hockey East, as the MAC does not have a hockey league. The MAC presidents voted UMass in on Monday. The school had formally applied to the league. The timing of an announcement is not known, but UMass is set to accept and finalize the details of an arrangement in the near future. Once the school formally applies in conference realignment, there's usually an understanding that they will be accepted and enter the league. UMass had been engaged with Conference USA per sources. Ultimately, the MAC made more geographic sense, and it also houses more of the sports that UMass offers. UMass AD Ryan Bamford made clear in recent comments that joining a league was a priority for UMass. That sentence right there is gigantic for a couple of reasons. We'll get into those here in a second. The move to UMass will leave Notre Dame and Connecticut as the lone independents in college football, with Army set to join the American Athletic Conference in the upcoming season. Think about that. We're going to get in that here in a second, so check that out. First of all, let's go through the geographic sense making of the MAC adding UMass, because there is some to it. And a lot of people say, oh, this makes no sense at all. Okay, here you go. Check this out. It's a little dim for you, but you can see this here, that here is the MAC. Okay, we've got Buffalo here. We've got Ohio, Kent State and Akron. We've got, Toledo and Bowling Green, Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan, Western Michigan, Northern Illinois. We've got Ball State, and then we have Miami, Ohio. Boom. Look at how good. Anyways, that's where all these teams are. They all fit within this little circle here. UMass is right here. They're right about this H of Massachusetts. This H just to the right of this highway right here. That's where they're at. So it's still going to be a reasonable trip, but not too bad for them. They play football. They're going to play 8 conference games, 9 conference games, whatever it is. They're going to play right there. So it makes some sense in that respect. However, remember that important line that we talked about here in terms of the lone independent teams in college football. So first thing we're going to do really quickly here is we're going to go to the 2022 season. All right, the 2022 season. So we've got our FBS independents in 2022. We got Notre Dame. We got Liberty. We got BYU. We got New Mexico State, Army, UConn, and UMass as well. So that's in 2022. We have 7 teams that are independents. Okay, that's fine. That's a good number. So 7 in 1 year. However, we take 1 more year into the future, and we have 4. So 3 of those are gone. So Liberty, gone to Conference USA. New Mexico State, gone to Conference USA. As a matter of fact, both of them played in the conference championship for Conference USA. And then BYU entered into the Big 12. They're also being joined by Colorado, Arizona, and Utah as well. So again, good matchup there. It's a good addition to it, and Arizona State as well. I apologize. So we see that here. Army is entering into the American. Now they're entering in the American, but they're only going to play Navy as a non-conference member. I can talk about that later on. But then UMass is entering into the Mid-American. They're coming down here. So they're probably going to enter into the East. Now, again, what a good point is they don't have to have 14 members, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities they could add a 14 member. Whether or not UMass has the ability to add somebody, I don't know. I mean, they could maybe come down here to the Sun Belt. I don't think any of those teams are leaving. If we go to the Conference USA, I know that Western Kentucky and Mid-Tennessee State, those teams had talked to them back. But again, whether or not they do it or not, I don't know. I mean, Liberty's close by. We'll see what the MAC can do. Again, Tuesday night action, we might be getting ourselves going a little bit farther south for a couple of those teams. But again, right now, UConn and Notre Dame are the only ones left. Because what's happening here, and I think what's happening is the strength of adding in a team into a conference. You saw the fact that it just solves so many things for UMass. They want to get this thing done. UConn is different. UConn's a national championship level team in college basketball and a couple other sports too. Now, their football team, they're all right. They're independent. Stadium's off campus. It's kind of a weird mixture there. So the question is I think what's going to happen here is UConn's going to pick a conference. Now, you come over here to the American. The American, I think they're going to lose SMU, obviously, but they're still going to have Memphis. A couple of the others, South Florida, Kayshawn Pryor, my boy from Boise State. He's in the league too. And then you see they have Navy. They also are going to have Army as well. Now, again, I think that some of those are only going to be for football only. So UConn would still be kind of a weird member there. They could probably join the American for football only in the same way that Navy only plays in the football only there. We see the fact that Army is only going to play football only there. It could be an option for them. The real question with that, what happens with Notre Dame? I think that Notre Dame, of all the teams, can handle this one. UMass is not a big market team. I know that you're like, oh, yeah, well, Massachusetts, big states, the University of Massachusetts. Well, I don't know how much of a draw they are, per se. I know that Army is a draw just because a lot of people in the Army watch them. Navy, too. UConn has a really good basketball program. We'll see what happens with the football program. We'll see what they can do that. But I do think that now there's only two FBS football independents, Notre Dame and UConn. There's lots of pressure, especially financial pressure. I think that UConn isn't as much. Notre Dame is not in the financial pressure. Now, like I said, we'll see what happens in the future. I think Notre Dame, first of all, I think they're like, listen, we haven't finished top 5 in the regular season in a while, so we're not really worried about not getting that first round bye in the playoffs. Besides, worst comes to worst, we're just going to host a playoff game if we get in, more than likely. So for Notre Dame, I don't think this is going to be the beginning of the end of the FBS independent, but I am trying to say that you have to have certain things in place to be an FBS independent and handle it. UConn, in the Big East for basketball, winning national championships, they're probably fine. Their football program, I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the red at this point. Now, I know that they can supplement it elsewhere, but if, like I said, not very good at football, independent, no conference, off-campus stadium, I just, ugh. That's my most professional opinion is, ugh. It's the best I can do. Notre Dame has a conference, the ACC. Whether or not they feel like they belong in the ACC in football, what could be interesting here? Florida State is trying to figure their way out of the league now. What if Notre Dame tried to say to the league, all right, here's the deal. We'll join you guys in football. We want uneven payouts. Florida State says, okay, we'll do that. We'll stay in the league if we can do that. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I am trying to say that I think that the FBS's independents are all going to go away at some point. How soon? I don't know. But I'm thinking that we're already seeing the smaller ones go away, and that added pressure from the fact that, you got to have a lot of things in place. I think that of all the teams that have those things in place, Notre Dame's one of them. Notre Dame's fine on money, but I don't know. That's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to say, I don't know. All right. That's it for me, guys. I really appreciate you. Orlando, Renee, dude, you guys, thank you so much for commenting. I really appreciate all that. I'm going to cut this up into some videos here. If you guys have any recommendations for videos, let me know what you guys want. Like I said, I'm still experimenting with the live stream and then cut up and paste model. It's very scalable. It just makes it easier. But anyways, guys, get in the comments. Let me know what you guys think. And remember, please like, share, comment, subscribe to all that stuff. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, all of you, so much for being here. I appreciate this community more than anything. Bill, my boy, appreciate it. Good show. It'll be a better show when Boise State gets an offensive coordinator. We still don't know who it's going to be. Whoever it's going to be, you got a very, very, very easy job. Okay. You got 5-star quarterback. You got, Ashton Genty. You got some good receivers. You're going to be fine. My boy, 01 Mad Cat. Appreciate it. Appreciate it, my friend. And remember, guys, if you guys want to see something, let me know. But that'll be it for me, guys. I will see you guys later. I am